Does God want a separation of church and state? Should Christians be voting biblical principles? Does it really matter who you vote for? Join Pastor Jerry Cook as he endeavors to answer these and many other questions over the next hour on Politics in the Pulpit. And now, Pastor Jerry Cook.
Good afternoon and welcome to Politics in the Pulpit. This is your holy host, Pastor Jerry Cook, back for another opportunity to talk about the two things that no one wants to talk about in public, religion and politics, and yes, they do mix. Back from a wonderful time in the great state of Wyoming, I want to thank the Italian stallion Joe Messina for sitting in for me last Wednesday, and the guest that he had in, I think it was Pastor David Haig from Grace Baptist Church, talking about his new book on marriage, which I have got, and I'm going to start reading very, very soon. So thanks, Joe, for sitting in, and had a great time in the state of Wyoming. It was a little bit warm, but got some snow the last couple days, and so we were able to get the harvest of the animal in, and all done, I would say, swiftly, ethically, and with all respect to the animal. So I really enjoy the conservation aspect of hunting, and maybe we'll do a whole show on that one of these days, because people have kind of a whack view on hunting, because some people just hunt just for the sake of the head. I don't think that's an ethical way to take an animal, so maybe one of these days we might do that. But anyway, good to be back with you today here on your hometown station. I want to give a couple quick shameless plugs here before we get Jennifer Van Laar on, who's, of course, patiently waiting on the other end right now. But Christmas is just around the corner. I know that Halloween is next Thursday, but Christmas is just a couple of months away. And some of you out there might have an extra dollar or two. If you go on GoFundMe, I have a buddy in Missouri by the name of Tim Holliday, who has been in a wheelchair for a long time. And he has a GoFundMe called Home for the Holiday. That's holiday with 2 L's. And if you go on there, you can help to fund his home that'll be more conducive for his wheelchair accessibility. Encourage you to help him out and be a blessing if you can. Again, that's Home for the Holiday, holiday with double L's, HOLLIDAY on your GoFundMe. Also, very quickly, Politics in the Pulpit is now on Rumble. We've got about 6 or 7 shows, and it is all, believe it or not, commercial-free. Encourage you to go on. The show today with Jen Laura will also be on there probably, I'd say, by 5 o'clock our time here in California. But anyway, well, listen, good to have Jennifer Van Laar with us. She's the managing editor at Red State. She's an unapologetic California conservative. I know that sounds a little oxymoronic, but they do exist. She's a sports fanatic, mom of 3 boys, and according to her bio here, a granny to 2 perfect little girls. And how perfect are they, Jennifer?
The most perfect little girls ever made.
There's absolutely no bias, I'm sure, connected to that.
None at all.
Absolutely not. Well, Jennifer, thank you for joining us. Now, this is your second time on our show. Appreciate it very, very much. And you guys over at Red State are just busy because there seems to be news breaking almost minute by minute. And here we are just 13 days away from one of the most consequential elections in our lifetime. I want to begin by talking about Kamala Harris's blue wall problem. And do you see that blue wall cracking again? And do you see a 2016 redo where Trump takes all 3?
I'm not going to make any predictions about what's going to happen.
You're not going to be prognosticating today? Come on.
No, I am famously terrible at prognosticating about political things. The only big one I got right was that Joe would not be the candidate for Joe Biden for the Democrats this year. That ended up being correct. But she does have a huge blue wall problem. In all of the states considered the blue wall, she's at least tied, if not behind Trump, depending on which poll you're looking at. And considering that a lot of the polls in 2020 and even 2016 favored the Democrats by a few points, 2 to 6 even, depending on the state. For her to be tied in any of them is a huge problem.
And what about her Michigan problem, considering that some of the editorials and some of the magazines ops that I've been reading seem to suggest that she's having a problem with Arab Americans, specifically in Michigan. What say you?
Yeah, that's going to be something that she's continuing to try to balance. That she's trying to please both sides here, and you can't please both sides. You have to come out on the side of morality, which I believe is supporting Israel. But she, on one hand today, she's calling Trump Hitler. She's going to double down on that whole Atlantic article that's been debunked. And she was saying, and Hitler was terrible, and he was responsible for the death of 6 million Jews and a bunch of other people. But for her to say that is so hollow, because it's not like a lot of her followers really care that a bunch of Jewish people or even Americans were killed, because that's what's happened over the last year, and they don't care. So she's just got a big problem where she can't serve both masters there.
No, exactly right. Well, Jen, you just dropped an article today at Red State. Desperate much? ? Yes, Kamala Harris really held a press conference just to call Donald Trump Hitler. And of course, you're suggesting in this article that it seems like the Atlantic might have given her a tip saying, listen, we're going to be dropping this October surprise, as it were, with former Chief of Staff John Kelly to President Trump. And he's going to say all kinds of mean and horrible things that, of course, we've already heard ad nauseum for the last decade about Donald Trump. And here's Kamala, without taking one question from the press, comes out just to say Trump is a Hitler.
Yeah, that's basically what she said. I think that she was not happy that the story wasn't getting enough traction, even though different legacy TV channels and, of course, MSNBC, CNN led with this whole debacle of a story that's been completely denied by everyone who's named in it except for Kelly. And she just came out and did this hastily called press conference. She didn't have anything on her calendar until tonight for a CNN town hall. And then just within an hour of that, when the conference took place, she sent out a press release. Hey, come to the Naval Observatory in an hour. I'm going to give a statement. And all she did was talk about Trump allegedly looking up to Hitler. It was bizarre.
Now, why do you think the Atlantic thinks, who does Jeffrey Goldberg think that he's trying to convince or is trying to bring over to Kamala's side by putting out this John Kelly story?
I mean, John Kelly also had said the whole suckers and losers thing before about Trump that everyone else that was around said didn't happen. And so I don't know who knew who they're going to convince at this point, 13 days out, that she doesn't need to be leaning into this hardcore never Trump stuff that only the most true believers are going to be falling for. She needs to be going and talking to people. I don't really believe there are that many undecideds left, but she needs to be going and talking about the things that just everyday people are caring about, and that's not it.
No, I absolutely agree with that. And speaking about the Atlantic, they seem to be in hot water today as well, because the esteemed political hack Jeffrey Goldberg, allegedly Trump was heard trashing a slain veteran who died during his administration, alleging that Trump scoffed at the price of the funeral by saying it doesn't cost $60,000 to bury a blanking Mexican. And I got an article here from the Right Scoop, hat tip to them. Republican went on to CNN and basically destroys this article by the Atlantic. And then the family of the deceased veteran is calling out the Atlantic for lying in order to use this to attack former President Trump. At what point does the mainstream media realize that, some of us are just not buying their lies anymore?
I mean, they're going to have people come out and put their names to this stuff, because I've used anonymous sources in the past. You have to sometimes. But in this case, there's no danger for someone to come out being anti-Trump within the media atmosphere that we have now. They're not going to risk anything in their career by coming out and saying that. We even have this Nick Ayers, who is the chief of staff to Vice President Pence, who hasn't spoken out on a lot of this stuff before. But a couple of hours ago, he posted on X saying, I've avoided commenting on intra-staff leaks or rumors or even lies as it relates to my time at the White House. But General Kelly's comments regarding President Trump are too egregious to ignore. I was with each of them more than most, and his commentary is patently false.
Wow. And that's from a
Pence chief of staff. You wouldn't expect them to be right.
That's excellent. And you know, all I can say is you can smell the desperation when the Atlantic does this double whammy here. And I don't think it is going to find the intended audience that they think it's going to. And by the way, just on a side note, Jennifer Van Laar with Red State, do you think are we living in a time when an October surprise is not what it used to be?
Oh, definitely, because there's so many times when people start early voting. You know, in North Carolina, they started voting before we did, I think, as far as the in-person early voting. You know, when I lived there, it was only maybe a week before the election that you could do early voting. So with so many different time frames for different states, it's hard to do an October surprise if that's your thing.
And you know, the other thing too is we've been, you know, privy to all of Trump's foibles and misspeaks and some of his exaggerations as a braggadocious New Yorker. And so we kind of know what to expect. And then when they say things like, you know, he's guilty of, you know, piracy out in the open sea, we just kind of roll our eyes and say, yeah, we've heard that before.
Yeah, and they've cried wolf too many times about him. And part of Kamala's press conference, I guess, well, she didn't take questions, so part of her statement was saying that, you know, General Kelly and other people had tried to be the guardrails for Trump before, and if there's a second Trump administration, then he won't have those people around, and he'll just be free to do whatever. So I think that they've caught on to that the American people already know what they lived through for 4 years under President Trump, and so they have that experience to judge by. And she's trying to tell them, oh, if it wasn't that bad then, here's why, and here's how it's going to be terrible if he gets back in there.
A minute ago, you mentioned early voting, and of course, several states have been, you know, voting for the last several weeks now. But where early voting has been taking place, Jen, based on the data we are seeing coming out of these states, especially where you have a partisan breakdown, could this mean that we will know who the winner is on election night if these numbers, which are favoring Republicans at the time, do you think we might know the winner on election night?
I mean, it's definitely possible. As far as the California, even when we were 14 days out in the 2020 general election, the Democrats, 53.2% of them had returned their ballots, and at this time in this cycle, only 48.7%. So that's a 5-point loss for the Democrats as far as the percentage of their voters who are returning their ballots by this time in the cycle. So that's not good for them. So even in California, we're seeing that same trend.
Yeah, and in the states where we've had early voting like Pennsylvania, Nevada, and others, it seems like the trend lines are definitely moving in the Republicans' direction. Obviously, all eyes in Nevada on Clark County in particular, and it seems like things are trending in the right direction there. Just saw something break yesterday, Morris. I just saw something, I believe it was in the Bulwark or maybe the Dispatch. I'm not a fan of either one of those particular publications very much, but every once in a while I want to look over there to see what those guys are thinking,
right.
like David Drucker and the rest of those guys. But there was an article, I think by Kevin Williamson, if I'm not mistaken, basically suggesting there's some buyer's remorse. What say you, Jen, about that? You think the Democrats are kind of gritting their teeth going, we should have stuck with Joe?
Yeah, I don't know if they're thinking, I mean, they probably are thinking that, but they're not realizing how bad it would have gotten over the next few months if he was forced to keep up with that schedule. Because I don't know if you saw my story in July, but from my sources within military intelligence and within some of the protective services, Joe Biden has been having a bunch of mini strokes. And that's what happened in Vegas that day when they had to fly him back. And then he dropped out shortly after. So if he had to still try to keep proving himself, I think that, I mean, it could have put him in the hospital or killed him by now.
I remember that story. In fact, there was the follow-up where you had all the 911 calls, if I'm not mistaken, and the dispatch from the police station there in Las Vegas.
Right. So, I mean, I think it's always the grass is greener kind of thing. You know, think, oh, maybe I should have stuck with that one without remembering all of the bad parts of it.
So let's quickly talk about Kamala's problem with the religious right. Last Thursday, and I'm pretty sure there was a Red State article about this, at a rally in Wisconsin where a couple of Christian pro-life believers were at the Kamala rally and said Jesus is king, and something about abortion being the sacrament of death or something like that. And then, of course, Kamala retorted with, "Oh, we don't think you're at the right rally, and you need to go down to the one that's smaller down the street." I'm not quoting her; I'm paraphrasing slowly.
Right.
But what I'm reading from various sources is that no one can be completely positive about whether or not Kamala was responding to those two hecklers, as they call them, or just people saying, yelling out lies, 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 as she was talking about Roe v. Wade and it being overturned. Why do you think they're trying to create this confusion? Are they trying to somehow convince us that Kamala is actually good for the faith community?
I don't know who would do that, but because we know that she was fully on board with all of the churches and everything being shut down during COVID. She's targeted pro-life people, I think, almost more than any other politician has, if you count her time as California AG. And she would definitely be terrible for the faith community, and she has no respect for it.
Well, I'm convinced that she was referring to those pro-life individuals last Thursday, because yesterday she was on NBC, and she was asked the question about whether religious organizations, especially hospitals, could have religious exemptions via their conscience when it comes to abortion. And she was very adamant, we are not going to provide religious exemptions for something as important and sacred as bodily autonomy. So I think it's very clear to me, and I would encourage my Christian friends out there that may not like necessarily the boorishness of Trump to remember what she said last night on NBC about religious exemptions concerning abortion. That party embraces abortion like we embrace Ronald Reagan.
They absolutely do. But it's funny how their bodily autonomy and religious exemptions, they also don't want any exemptions for vaccinations, but they're not honoring bodily autonomy there.
Jen,
so if she wants to take her bodily autonomy to the vaccine debate, I'm all for that.
Jen, don't try to bring any common sense into this issue, okay? We're talking to Jennifer Van Laar, who's the managing editor of Red State. Jen, can you stay on for another few minutes right after the break?
Sure.
Want to talk to you a little bit about California and just the sea change that we're kind of seeing. I was just listening to Steve Hilton's podcast, and I'll premise that when we come back on the other side of the break here on Politics in the Pulpit on your hometown station. All right, we're back here now live on Politics in the Pulpit on your hometown station. This is your holy host, Pastor Jerry Cook. I want to make a quick correction. Earlier I was talking about Home for the Holiday, my friend out in the state of Missouri. That is not a GoFundMe, by the way. That is a Give, Send, Go. So I wanted to make that correction there at the bottom of the hour. So hopefully you guys can go to Home for the Holiday. Holiday, that is double L, HOLLIDAY, Give, Send, Go, and be a blessing to him, maybe an early Christmas gift. Well, we're talking to Jennifer Van Laar, the managing editor for Red State, and I want to just say real quickly, Jennifer, just what an indispensable resource Red State and Town Hall is to the conservative community. They're updating their stuff almost minute by minute. And I'm checking Red State, Town Hall, and others literally every 15 minutes, and there's always an update, and that's because the news cycle is moving that quickly.
Yeah, it is. It's so hard to keep up with.
It's amazing, and it's great for political junkies like you and myself and others. But for some people that they just can't keep up with it. But what can we say? Let's turn our attention to California. You live in California. You're in here in Southern California. I'm in Southern California. We live in the belly of the beast down here when it comes to leftism. But yet, the other day I was listening to Steve Hilton on his podcast, and he was suggesting pretty clearly and quite convincingly, at least in my opinion, that there seems to be a political revolution brewing here in California, and that's not from the left, but from the right. I'm just wondering, do you agree with Steve Hilton here that there seems to be a political revolution brewing here in the state of California?
I agree. And I think that what we need to help that revolution along is a lot more infrastructure for conservatives to be engaged and to do the things like the get out the vote and talking to their neighbors and friends about, hey, let's vote differently. Let's have a different experience. And I've actually been paying attention to some of the races up in Santa Clarita and in this general area of California. And especially Suzette Valadares, they've knocked so many doors. They're the only campaign in California who's knocked more doors than the Suzette Valadares campaign is Michelle Steele in that battleground in Orange County. So people, and I remember a time a decade ago when I worked on with a bunch of politicians in Santa Clarita where we couldn't get 5 people to knock doors on a Saturday. So I think that it's really the time for this revolution to occur, and people are starting it.
And do you think Michelle Steele is going to hold that seat?
I do. I feel really good about all of our swing seats, I guess you'd call them, within California. Even Mike Garcia, I know that one's super close, but Garcia does such a good job with his constituents and really represents them. So I think that he'll pull that out. It's
funny talking about Mike. I met Mike in 2019 when he was still with Raytheon, and a friend of mine worked with Mike at Raytheon and introduced me to him and said, hey, listen, there's a guy that's thinking about running for Congress. And this was just before the whole Katie Hill sex debacle blew up.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to meet Mike, and I actually had him at our church for our Red, White, and Blue Sunday right when all that stuff kind of blew up. And we backed him early. And, of course, he won 3 of those races against Christy Smith. Now they've got a pasty white guy, ironically, by the name of George Whitesides that is running against Mike. And I did see a political poll. I did see a poll on Political about a week or 2 ago saying that George Whiteside was up by 1. But, of course, they had Christy Smith up by 3, 4, 5 points in the past. And, of course, Mike would slaughter in all those elections. But what do you think the angle is here with the Democrats in putting up George Whitesides? Do you think that pasty white thing is going to somehow work here in Santa Clarita?
Well, I think because he has a similar professional background to Garcia, I think is what they were going after, trying to tap into all of that industry in the Antelope Valley. That's the only thing I can think of why the whole pasty white guy thing would work.
I actually met George at a concert here recently. He's actually a really nice guy in person. Just his policies suck. That's basically it. So he's actually quite a nice guy. You talked about Suzette's race, which of course is trying to keep that seat up there in the Antelope Valley and part of Santa Clarita into Victorville in the Republican section. And, of course, you've written ad nauseum about Kip Mueller and his deception and lies in his ads, which, of course, has all been kind of deceptively taken away. What do you think's going on there? Do you think Suzette's going to hold that seat, or do you think Kip is going to try to pull out an upset here?
I mean, he's definitely going to try to pull it out, but like I said, their ground game is so good, and at this point, that the ground game is what it's about. So I know that there's some Republican voters who are a little hesitant on Suzette and have some concerns, particularly about the abortion issue. But Kip would be a million times worse, and he's young and comes across well. If he goes up there, it'd be hard to get him back out. So don't let that animosity keep you from voting for Suzette.
Yeah, I look at Kip Mueller as the Antelope Valley's version of Kent Rollins out there in the Riverside area. They're both young, they're both smooth, and they both seem like someone that you can trust. But in reality, we know that most snakes look pretty until, of course, they bite you, and we don't necessarily want a Kip Mueller representing us. I live in Acton, which is just outside of the AV, and I haven't seen a Kip Mueller yard sign. I haven't seen a Harris Waltz flag anywhere in the area where I live, and I'm in a mountainous community.
Well, that's a great sign. Let's hope that bears out with the way that the votes come in.
I sure hope so. Let's talk about Patrick Lee Gibson and Pilar Chavo. So Patrick and I go back a couple of years. He's not a professional politician. Obviously, he's a retired cop. He's got a great wife that has really been pulling for her husband. Pilar, of course, is a transplant from the San Francisco area, much like Kamala. So what are your thoughts about the Patrick Lee Gibson and the Pilar Chavo and the 40th?
I mean, she's outspending him. I just was looking at some of the financials today. She's outspending him 10-1, and he's still right there on her heels. So, and we know that in the primary, he hardly spent anything and was right there with her. So that shows that there's not a lot of enthusiasm for Pilar in the community, and shows that that seat is really ready to flip.
I got something to share with you. So a couple of months ago, I was at an event for the Guardians, which is a organization for firemen and cops and veterans as well. And there were a bunch of us there, a bunch of Republican candidates. And Pilar, of course, was not supposed to be speaking, but she kind of forced herself in. And it was towards the end of this event. And as soon as she got up to start talking, and it was sad, to be honest with you, Jen, people just started wandering away and weren't paying attention to her at all. And I'm talking about 100 people, maybe more. And they just walked away.
Well, she should have known that that was not going to be a sympathetic audience for her, and not try to force her way up there. It just shows she doesn't know how to read the room, literally.
No, she doesn't know how to read the room. And talking about not being able to read the room or the tea leaves, George Gascon seems to be really bullish about his prospects on November 5th. I am not the, by the way, I think he's the Cuban Kermit the Frog. There's something about him that reminds me of a Cuban Kermit the Frog. But anyway, Nathan Hochman is not my favorite choice. Obviously, he's the only choice, and so therefore I'm going to vote. I have voted for Nathan Hochman. And by the way, I saw his debate, the last one a couple weeks ago with George Gascon. I thought Nathan did a great job and just did a masterful job taking George Gascon apart. However, polls have come out. Nathan Hochman's 30 points ahead. The money is drying up on the George Gascon side. I think he's barely got a little over $1.5 million in the coffers. Nathan Hochman's got well over $10 million. You think that thing is going to be a 30-point blowout?
I don't know if it'll be a 30-point blowout, but I'd feel confident saying that Gascon is not going to be the DA anymore. And you can tell he's focusing on doing things like trying to get new trials for people he thought were wrongfully convicted, or doing, the things that if he knows he's not going to be in office come December.
You mean like the Menendez brothers?
Yeah.
It's amazing how a Netflix show has got everybody in a flutter about the Menendez brothers. No one even remembered who they were until the Netflix show.
I did, but I'm a nerd.
Yeah, well, some of us are. There's no doubt about that. And what about the fact that California, I mean, obviously a left state, it seems like the road to a House majority is going to run right through California.
Again. Yep.
Again, yeah. And what are your thoughts? And what are your thoughts about the House majority in terms of it increasing? Do you think we're actually going to increase it? Because obviously the bullishness now of the House actually being maintained by the Republicans seems to be extending a bit.
Yeah, I'm not going to go out and say red wave or anything, but I think that we can expand it by a few seats. I think we need to, because otherwise it's going to be difficult to get a lot done. I feel like we're going to take the Senate, and so we've got to do those things and then make sure that we pressure our lawmakers to get the things done that are President Trump's priorities, before that midterm.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts about David Vallejo up there in the Central Valley? Of course, one of the Republicans that if I'm not mistaken, voted to impeach President Trump. I could be mistaken on that, but
yeah, I think he did.
Okay, I know that a few weeks ago it was a little bit iffy about whether or not he would maintain that seat, but what is your perspective on that now?
It's definitely going to be a heavy lift, but I'm optimistic about it too, because the things are just so bad in California, and a lot of times that translates to people not voting for the party that is in charge, which in California, that's Democrat. So that'll just go down ticket.
We know also that Gavin Newsom is not going to run for re-election because he can't, and we can all thank God for that.
Exactly.
What are your thoughts about someone, an independent or Republican, running? Who are you vying for to run for governor here in the state of California? Who are you eyeballing? Who do you think would be the best option?
Well, first, going back on the point we were just making before, the fact that Gavin Newsom is not campaigning for Kamala Harris in the Central Valley and in those swing districts for Congress shows, just he doesn't want them to associate Newsom with those people, with the Democrats on the ticket there. As far as a Republican, I've heard through the grapevine that Steve Hilton will be throwing his hat in the ring come January, and I would be supporting him.
And I've heard that too, and I haven't heard any solid leads on that, other than I think Jen Horn mentioned a few things to me, and I think you've said it yourself. And
it's pretty solid.
Okay. Well, then, do we think that Steve Hilton has got what it takes to win up and down the state of California?
I do. I'm trying to think what I could say without crossing any lines of private conversations.
Be careful there, Jen. Be careful.
Yes. I will just say that there's a lot of thought about strategy and exactly how to get it done. And I do know that anyone that's paid attention to Steve's social media lately, he's been up and down the state meeting with people in their communities, hearing what their ideas for things that they think need to be different. And so that's obviously a huge first step.
Yeah. And if you had to guess, and I want to just throw this out there because it depresses me, but Steve Garvey seems to be on a trajectory of wanting to lose this Senate seat. I wasn't exactly excited about his debate performance the other night against Pencil Neck Shift. What is his strategy other than just winning Hispanic baseball fans, I guess? What do you think he's trying to do? I mean, Steve Garvey could potentially be a senator, but I don't think he really wants it.
Yeah, I don't think he really does either. I don't know why he got in it. I know it was probably 6 months from the time I first heard he was going to maybe get in until he finally announced. So I don't know what the holdup was there. He obviously would have needed the time to build up his campaign throughout the state. So maybe he just never really wanted it and finally got talked into it. But in my mind, he's a lot like Hockman. I'm going to vote for him, but I don't think he has a chance.
Yeah, well, thanks for getting our excitement level up there, Jen. I appreciate that very much. Well, Jen, thank you so much for joining us today on Politics in the Pulpit, and always encourage you to come back. And hopefully, when we wake up on November 6th, we can feel bullish about the country. And by the way, one last thing. Dan Bongino likes to make this point on his show almost daily. But let's say Trump does win, Jen, on November 5th, and it is a decisive win. We're talking, maybe 38 to 42 states. And he wins the popular vote, ekes it out by 1 or 2 points, maybe even 3 points. What do you think the condition of America is going to be like between November 6th of 2024 and January 20th of 2025?
It's going to be interesting. Just as bad as it was in 2016 to 2017, but amplified by a few orders of magnitude.
I'm actually kind of scared, and I don't say that as a wimpy dude, but I think they're going to do everything they possibly can if, in fact, he does win decisively, and it's a sweep where Trump wins the Senate and the House. Mark Halperin made this point on Tucker's show the other day on X, that there's going to be such a mental, psychological breakdown in the country that it's going to be absolutely palatable.
People needed counseling and days off whenever he won in 2016. I can't imagine how out of touch they're going to be, how unable to function they're going to be.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, let's see what happens on November 5th. I know you're not good at prognostication, but I'm going to say that Donald Trump is going to win and be president number 47 for the United States of America. Jennifer Van Laar, managing editor for Red State, thank you so much for doing what you do and keeping us all informed, and thank the Red State team for doing that as well.
I will. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. When we come back here on Politics in the Pulpit, we'll have a few more things to say to you. We'll also give you an update on the Christian students who were kicked out of the Kamala rally last week. There's a town hall article that just came out right now with those two students speaking, and so I'm gonna give you a little bit of their own words here in just a second when we return on Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station. We're back here live on our final segment here on Politics in the Pulpit on your hometown station, AM 1220 and 98.1 FM. It is, I'm going to give you a couple of shameless plugs here right before we come to the end of the show. The next 2 Sundays at Freedom's Way Baptist Church, we've got 2 exciting events, I think. The first is this coming Sunday, October 27th. It is our Civic Duty Sunday, where I do a great tradition that preachers have done for the last 200 plus years of American history, and that's preach an election year sermon. So I'll be doing that this coming Sunday in the grand tradition of preachers down through the centuries. And then on November 3rd is our Prayer, Policy, and Petition Sunday, and that's where we're going to preach to and pray for many of those that are seeking higher office, and we've invited many of them to our services, and many of them will be joining us for that Sunday morning service, November 3rd. By the way, that's also, you'll have to fall back 1 hour on November 2nd and lose 1 hour of sleep. But hey, it is what it is. But so don't forget to fall back that 1 hour. Real quickly, a lot of people have asked me about Halloween and whether or not you should celebrate it. And depending on the pastor that you ask, they're going to have varying opinions on this. And obviously, we do something at our church called a Harvest Festival, and that's where we bring the kids together with parents, and we do a trunk and treat. And of course, I hear some churches are against that too. And of course, we have bouncers. We got horse rides. In fact, I think we have 2 horses this coming Sunday evening, where we're going to be offering horse rides to all the kids. There'll be a bounce house, trunk and treat, of course, as I mentioned, and then a bunch of fall soups and desserts and, all kinds of food that kind of devoted to the fall season. And that's what we do at our church. And of course, the kids will come dressed up as their favorite, either Bible character or superhero, whatever the case might be. Of course, we don't encourage any horrific-looking, Michael Myers or Jason or something like that when you come to the church. But, kids can dress up in some costumes and have fun. Of course, candies, and there'll be some games and things of that nature. But depending on who you ask, there's no doubt that Halloween has a dark side to it. There's no doubt about that. Obviously, there is a celebration of death, and there's a celebration of the Gothic and the macabre. And yeah, I get that. But on the other hand, my 9-year-old daughter knows one thing about Halloween, and that is free candy from complete strangers. And to be honest with you, Dad is excited about free candy from complete strangers because I get to rummage through 3 different bags and pick out my favorites. So we take our kids out. My oldest son is 18, so I'm assuming he's not really going to be going trick-or-treating with us that evening. However, my 13-year-old, by the way, shout out to my son Derek. He's 13 years old today, and so happy birthday, Derek. We're going to take him out to dinner here in a little bit. But Derek, my 13-year-old, and Serena, my 9-year-old, all they know is it's a fun time to dress up and get some candy. And if that is the extent of your celebration, I think that's fine. I know that adults get a little more macabre when it comes to the whole Halloween celebration, and I'm not into that. I decorate my home with fall colors and leaves and pumpkins and scarecrows and things like that, but nothing evil, nothing I don't have Art the Clown in my bathroom or anything like that. I think it'd be better to have him up on the screen. But the fact is, yeah, you can walk into my house and see all the fall colors, and I think people like that. And I don't even care if you carve your pumpkin. We don't carve ours because we want our pumpkins there all the way through Thanksgiving, so we can keep all that stuff up through Thanksgiving, and then take it all down, and then methodically put up Christmas. So if your pastor has a different position than mine, then you're just going to have to weigh the evidence on that. But in my opinion, I think Halloween should be really enjoyed by young children, and I think they should be able to go get some free candy from a bunch of complete strangers out there. And I think there's a wholesome way to look at that. And so I wouldn't go completely nuts and cut it out. And also, if you're a Christian and I would encourage you not to turn your porch light off and not pass out candy yourself. In fact, if you want to, you can pass out a church tract along with the candy, a bag of tricks, whatever you've got, and just be a blessing that way. I mean, you can still be a witness even in that. Listen, there are people coming to your front door. Why not be a blessing to them? A few moments ago, we were talking about the Christian students who were kicked out of the Kamala rally last Thursday, where they were supposedly yelling, "Jesus is Lord," and they were speaking out against the vice president who was amplifying religious intolerance and talking about the abortion topic. And there's a town hall article that just dropped 10 minutes ago, and it quotes and talks about these two young men from Wisconsin who were there, and they believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, one of the students is a junior at La Crosse there in Wisconsin, Luke Pulaski, who said that he wants to make it 100% clear that Harris was speaking directly to them when she said they were at the wrong rally. I don't know if you've seen the meme going around on Facebook of Jesus where it says, "Hey girl, I'm everywhere." And I think that's a little bit of a slap to this notion of you're at the wrong rally. And of course, if you believe in the biblical doctrine of the deity of Christ, you know that Jesus Christ is God and he's everywhere, so therefore he is everywhere. The other thing that these students yelled is they said, quote, "Abortion is a sacrament of Satan," to which he was immediately met with boos and hostile attacks. And again, if you're at a Democratic rally and you yell these things out, obviously you're going to get this type of reaction. There's no doubt about that. And some people would say, well, maybe these kids were there just to be, a stick in the mud, and they were there just to, cause a scene. Well, that might be the case. Because obviously some of these detractors come to Trump rallies and other conservative rallies, and they also make scenes as well. But, here's the thing. We live in America where we believe in free speech, and so obviously these folks can say, these young kids can say what they want, as long as it's within reason, of course. And I also have here on pretty good faith that these young people were also pushed, and they were also yelled at and things of that nature. And, of course, I'm sure these young men could handle that. But, all I can say is this. If you're going to go to a Democratic rally where the vice president is speaking and you're going to yell out Jesus is Lord and you're going to say things like abortion is the sacrament of Satan, then I'm going to assume you're going to meet some pushback on that. Just a quick thought on my part. Now, for those of you out there that are on the fence and have not voted early, may I encourage you to please get that ballot banked. I voted a few days ago. I've encouraged now for the last several weeks that our congregation, as well as friends within my sphere of influence, vote early. And so I would encourage you, fill out that ballot. It's real easy. Put that ballot in that envelope that is given you. Sign it out front the way you're supposed to and date it, and send it out. And you can track that ballot and make sure that it has been received and that your vote has been tabulated. We're really messing up the Democrats this year when it comes to this whole early voting thing. As I was talking to Jen Van Laar a little bit earlier, in states where early voting has been taking place, like Nevada and Pennsylvania, based on the data that we're seeing, because some of these states, remember, some of these states are nonpartisan, so we don't have the partisan breakdown about parties, but a lot of these states are partisan, like Virginia. We know how many Republicans have voted, how many Democrats have voted. Now, we don't know who they voted for. We're just assuming by their party affiliation that they voted for Kamala if you're Democrat, and you voted for Trump if you're Republican. And so based alone on that partisan data, we're seeing really, really, really good numbers. And it could mean that we will know who the winner is. And I think it's necessary that we know who the winner is on election night. And you know what? I'll be honest with you right now. As much as I do not want Kamala to win, I'll be fine if we can get a decisive win, one side or the other. Because I believe in a peaceful transfer of power, and I think the listeners out there believe that as well. But we also believe in free and fair elections. Well, excited about next Wednesday. I believe we're going to have Colonel Kurt Schlichter on for at least a segment next week. So excited about next week's show, because that's going to be the show right before the November 5th election. So there'll be a lot of talk about what's going to happen on that night, which is just 13 days away. Thanks for tuning in to Politics in the Pulpit today. This is your holy host, Pastor Jerry Cook, saying thank you so much for listening. Appreciate you being the family out there that listens to this show. And we'll catch you next week, same bat time, same bat channel, here on your hometown station. Take care.